In a suburb of Ohio, a tragedy occurred that shook the entire country and sparked heated discussions about family values, racial prejudice, and psychological support for children. A story that seemed impossible, a crime committed by an 8-year-old boy against those who took him in. This boy, adopted by a white couple, ended up killing his adoptive parents. What drove the child to take such a terrible step? How could it have come to this? We will tell you about the Hartman family and the tragedy hidden behind the facade of a perfect adoption. Tom and Linda Hartman lived in a quiet, unassuming suburb on the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio, where rows of modest houses lined the streets, and neighbors greeted each other with polite nods and friendly smiles. To an outsider, their life appeared ordinary and stable, the kind of peaceful existence many aspired to achieve. They were very much a middle-class couple, balancing careers, home life, and community involvement with the steady rhythm of everyday America. Both held steady jobs that afforded them financial security, but didn't place them among the wealthy elite. They worked hard, paid their bills on time, and maintained their home with care, embodying the values of responsibility and perseverance that define many families in similar neighborhoods. For years, Tom and Linda had dreamed of expanding their family. They longed for the laughter and energy that a child would bring to their home, envisioning holidays filled with joyful chaos and ordinary moments transformed by a child's presence. Yet, despite medical efforts and hopes, they were unable to conceive. The empty rooms in their house felt like silent reminders of that unfulfilled desire. The decision to adopt was not taken lightly, but emerged from a place of love and hope, a determination to open their hearts and home to a child in need. When they met Derek, an 8-year-old boy with dark skin and wide, searching eyes, they were moved by his story. Derek had experienced loss and instability in his young life, bouncing between foster homes and waiting for a permanent place to call home. Tom and Linda believed they could provide him with the safety and care he deserved. For a while, the adoption process filled them with optimism and anticipation. They imagined the family they would become, the bonds they would forge, and the new beginning Derek would have with them. Initially, the family seemed to settle into a peaceful routine. Derek arrived at the Hartman household and was welcomed with open arms, his small belongings unpacked in a room painted soft pastel colors. The house itself was a comfortable space, with a well-kept yard and inviting rooms that spoke of stability and order. Neighbors watched the family with approval, often commenting on how well Derek appeared to be adjusting. To many, the Hartmans were an example of a successful adoption, a story of love transcending differences and overcoming hardship. Tom and Linda worked diligently to establish a warm and secure environment for Derek. They enrolled him in a nearby school, made sure he attended regular medical checkups, and sought to engage him in community activities. Family dinners were held around the kitchen table, where Tom would talk about his workday and Linda would share stories from the neighborhood. These moments were meant to be the foundation of a new life for Derek, filled with normalcy and affection. Pictures of the three of them smiled from the mantelpiece, projecting an image of unity and happiness. Yet, despite appearances, an undercurrent of tension began to surface in the household. The barriers of cultural difference, unspoken fears, and unacknowledged biases slowly made themselves known. While Tom and Linda believed they were doing their best, certain attitudes and behaviors betrayed a discomfort with Derek's racial identity. Subtle comments, moments of impatience, and uneven expectations planted seeds of doubt in Derek's mind about his place in the family. These were not the overt acts of malice, but rather small, persistent signs of alienation that accumulated over time. Derek, a child who had already endured so much upheaval, found himself caught between the love he desperately needed and a feeling of exclusion he could neither fully understand nor express. His experiences before coming to the Hartman home had left scars, and now, within what should have been a sanctuary, he sensed that something was wrong. The warmth and safety he sought were compromised by the invisible walls raised by his parents' conflicting feelings and societal prejudices that lingered beneath the surface. Attempts to bridge this growing divide were made, sometimes with professional intervention. Social workers visited the family, counselors visited sessions to help Derek adjust, and therapists tried to unravel the complicated web of emotions swirling inside the young boy. Yet these efforts were fragmented and insufficient to address the deep-rooted issues within the family dynamic. Communication faltered, misunderstandings deepened, and the emotional distance between Derek and his parents widened. The community, meanwhile, remained largely unaware of the turmoil within the Hartman household. To neighbors and friends, the family's struggles were invisible, masked by the polished exterior and the well-maintained routine. Behind closed doors, however, Derek's internal world became increasingly fraught with confusion, loneliness, and frustration. His young mind wrestled with feelings of anger and rejection that he had no tools to process. The sense of being an outsider in the very family that was supposed to protect him gnawed at his spirit. As weeks turned into months, this simmering unrest began to manifest in subtle ways. Withdrawn behavior, sudden outbursts of emotion, and an inexplicable sense of desperation. The foundation that Tom and Linda had hoped to build with Derek was eroding beneath the weight of unspoken grievances and unmet needs. While they believed they were providing care, they failed to see the profound psychological impact their attitudes and the surrounding societal biases had on the boy. This fragile family unit, built on good intentions but weakened by hidden resentments and cultural disconnects, was approaching a breaking point. The tragedy that would soon unfold was not a spontaneous act, but the culmination of years of accumulated pain, miscommunication, and the inability to truly connect across the divides of race and experience. The hopeful story of adoption, so often seen as a symbol of new beginnings and unconditional love, became instead a heartbreaking testament to the complexities and challenges that lie beneath the surface of family life in America. The Hartman household, with its quiet streets and friendly neighbors, bore witness to this unfolding drama, a stark reminder that appearances can deceive and that the realities within families are often far more complicated than anyone outside can imagine. It was within these walls that Derek's story took a tragic turn, one that would leave a lasting impact on all who knew the family and provoke difficult questions about race, identity, and belonging in contemporary society. Despite the outward appearance of a caring and cohesive family, beneath the surface of the Hartman household, a growing tension was silently but steadily consuming the fragile bonds that tied them together. Tom and Linda, though well-intentioned in many ways, were not immune to the deep-seated societal prejudices that often go unnoticed but leave profound scars. Their behavior and words, perhaps unconsciously, betrayed an undercurrent of racial bias that Derek, with a sensitivity beyond his years, immediately perceived. This bias was not always blatant or direct. It was woven into the subtle fabric of their interactions. A glance lingered too long in disapproval, a tone slightly sharper than necessary, or an expectation that seemed unattainable for Derek simply because of who he was. These moments, seemingly insignificant to an outsider, accumulated in Derek's mind, forming an invisible barrier between him and the family he was supposed to belong to. For Derek, a child who had already endured instability and loss before arriving at the Hartman home, this unspoken rejection was particularly devastating. The isolation he felt was not just physical, but deeply emotional. The warm embrace he longed for was often replaced by cold distance, and the love he sought was overshadowed by an unspoken message that he was somehow different, lesser, or unwelcome. His skin color, a natural and unchangeable part of his identity, became a dividing line, an obstacle that Tom and Linda, whether knowingly or not, placed between themselves and their adopted son. This invisible divide was reinforced every time Derek noticed his achievements were met with less enthusiasm than those of children who looked like his parents, or when his feelings were dismissed as overreactions. As days turned into weeks, Derek's internal world grew darker. The confusion and hurt that churned inside him manifested as a growing resentment and anger that he struggled to articulate. Being so young, he lacked the vocabulary and emotional tools to express these complex feelings outwardly. Instead, they festered within, coloring his perception of himself and the people who were supposed to care for him. The boy's spirit, once bright with hope at the prospect of a new family, dimmed as he grappled with the painful reality that the acceptance he craved was conditional and fragile. The environment at home became increasingly fraught with silent tension. Derek withdrew more and more into himself, his behavior marked by sudden bursts of frustration and periods of quiet despondency. These changes did not go unnoticed. Concerned neighbors, school teachers, and relatives observed the boy's altered demeanor and reached out to social services. Psychologists and social workers entered the picture, aiming to mediate and provide support for the family. They sought to untangle the complex web of emotions and misunderstandings that had formed, hoping to restore peace and healing. However, the interventions were, unfortunately, limited in their effect. The deep-rooted issues within the Hartman family went far beyond what periodic visits and counseling sessions could resolve. Tom and Linda, entrenched in their own perceptions and biases, struggled to fully acknowledge or confront the extent of the emotional damage being inflicted on Derek. The professionals faced resistance, subtle or overt, as the family sought to maintain the facade of normalcy. The underlying racial tensions remained largely unspoken, festering in the shadows and eroding the foundation of trust and love necessary for a healthy parent-child relationship. Derek, caught in this storm, was left to navigate his complex emotions largely alone. Without a safe outlet for his pain, his resentment deepened, fueling feelings of abandonment and anger. The once hopeful boy became increasingly alienated, his behavior reflecting the turmoil within. Each day brought new challenges to his sense of identity and belonging, amplifying the emotional distance that separated him from Tom and Linda. The consequences of this growing tension rippled beyond the walls of the Hartman home. Friends and community members, though sympathetic, found themselves unable to penetrate the family's private struggles. The silent suffering of Derek became a cautionary tale of how unaddressed biases and emotional neglect can devastate even those situations that appear, on the surface, to be filled with love and care. The story underscored the vital importance of genuine acceptance and understanding in adoptive families, particularly those crossing racial lines. In this climate of unspoken pain and unresolved conflict, the stage was set for tragedy. The unresolved tensions within the Hartman family did not dissipate. Instead, they built to a crescendo. Derek's internal battle with feelings of isolation and rejection, compounded by the failure of those around him to recognize and address these struggles, created a volatile emotional landscape. It became clear that without true healing and connection, the damage would only deepen, leaving a young boy lost in a world where he could not find a place to belong. This story, marked by invisible wounds and silent suffering, serves as a sobering reminder of the complexities inherent in transracial adoption and the crucial need for ongoing emotional support and cultural understanding. It reveals how, despite the best intentions, the failure to confront and heal deep-seated issues can have devastating consequences. Consequences that no child should ever have to bear. One evening, as the sun dipped low beyond the horizon and cast a fading golden glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood, the atmosphere inside the Hartman home grew heavy with an unsettling stillness. The familiar hum of daily life seemed to pause, replaced by a tension that hung invisible but palpable in the air. Tom and Linda Hartman, immersed in their usual evening routine, moved through the motions of preparing dinner with practiced ease, unaware that this seemingly ordinary night would shatter the fragile illusion of family harmony forever. In the kitchen, pots simmered softly, filling the air with the comforting aroma of home-cooked food, a scent that masked the darkness lurking within the walls. To an outsider, it was a scene of tranquility and domestic normalcy, yet in the shadows, a silent storm was gathering. To Derek, the 8-year-old boy whose internal world had been racked with anger, confusion, and despair for months, stood quietly observing. His small frame was tense, with a mix of fear and determination, his thoughts swirling with emotions too complex and overwhelming for one so young to fully grasp. For days, perhaps even weeks, he had wrestled with the turmoil inside him, the crushing loneliness, the relentless feeling of being unwanted, and a simmering resentment born from years of subtle rejection and misunderstood pain. These feelings had coalesced into a dark resolve, one that he kept hidden beneath his youthful innocence. This evening, that resolve had reached its breaking point. For the first time, Derek had made a decision, a terrifying but clear choice. He would act, and in doing so, he would rid himself of the source of his suffering. In his mind, the adults who were meant to love and protect him, Tom and Linda, had become the embodiment of everything that trapped him in an unbearable existence. Their home, once a place that should have felt safe and warm, now felt like a cage, enclosing him in isolation and despair. His young mind, unable to fully process or articulate the complex emotions within, fixated on one solution, one act that would irrevocably change the lives of all involved. It was an act born from pain, desperation, and a longing to escape. With quiet, deliberate movements, Derek reached for the bottle of sleeping pills he had secretly obtained. These pills were more than just medication. They were his tool for control, his means to ensure that the adults around him would be vulnerable and unable to interrupt what he planned to do. His small hands trembled slightly as he carefully slipped the pills into the dishes that had been set before Tom and Linda. The act was chilling in its innocence and determination. A child blending poison into a meal with the same care as stirring soup. Each motion carried the weight of months of silent suffering, a culmination of pain that had gone unspoken, unacknowledged, and unhealed. As the evening progressed, Tom and Linda ate their dinner, unsuspecting and trusting. The sedative began its slow work. Their movements became sluggish, their eyelids heavy. Soon, the two adults succumbed to a deep, unnatural sleep. Derek watched silently as the people who had shaped his life slipped into unconsciousness. A strange mixture of relief and dread swirled within him. A relief that his plan was unfolding, and dread at the enormity of what he was about to do. He knew the moment had come to set his plan into motion. Grasping a lighter he had hidden away earlier, Derek moved cautiously through the house. Each step was light, almost hesitant, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on his small chest. The wooden walls, which had once stood as symbols of safety and shelter, now loomed around him like the bars of a prison. The home that was supposed to nurture him felt suffocating, a reminder of rejection and sorrow. The conflicting emotions inside him, fear, anger, despair, and a flicker of hopelessness, fueled the steadiness of his hand as he ignited the first flame. The fire caught quickly, devouring the dry wood with a ferocity that seemed almost unnatural. Flames licked up the walls, their hungry tongues reaching eagerly for everything in their path. Furniture, curtains, cherished belongings, all were consumed in moments, turning once treasured items into smoldering ash. Thick, acrid smoke filled the rooms, weaving through every corner and hallway, enveloping the space in choking darkness and searing heat. The crackling roar of the fire echoed relentlessly, a terrifying symphony signaling the end of an era and the beginning of a nightmare. Outside, the normally peaceful neighborhood was jolted into chaos. Neighbors, their evening disrupted by the ominous glow and the thick plumes of smoke spiraling into the sky, quickly recognized the danger. The serene quiet of their suburb shattered by urgency and fear. They scrambled to call emergency services, summoning firefighters in a desperate bid to save the family trapped within the inferno. Sirens soon pierced the air, and brave respondents raced toward the scene, their resolve unwavering even as the flames grew beyond control. Inside the house, the thick smoke and scorching heat formed an invisible, deadly barrier. Tom and Linda Hartman found themselves imprisoned within the very structure that once symbolized safety and love. Their final moments were engulfed by fire's relentless grip, their cries muffled and unheard amidst the chaos. They were unable to escape the rapidly spreading blaze, their hopes extinguished alongside the consuming flames. The lives of two people who had dared to dream of creating a loving home were cruelly and abruptly ended by the very child they had chosen to nurture and protect. When the fire was finally subdued and the smoke began to clear, the full extent of the devastation became heartbreakingly clear. Amidst the ruins, the lifeless bodies of Tom and Linda Hartman were discovered, silent witnesses to the horror that had unfolded within the walls they once called home. Derek, the young boy left alone in the wreckage of his actions, now faced the grim reality of the consequences. The community, once peaceful and trusting, was left in stunned shock, grappling with the incomprehensible fact that such a horrific act could emerge from within a family and from the hands of a child. That night marked a turning point, a devastating culmination of hidden pain, fractured relationships, and unhealed emotional wounds. The tragedy peeled back the surface of the Hartman family's facade, exposing deep-seated turmoil and unresolved tensions that had festered beneath the veneer of normalcy. It served as a somber reminder that behind closed doors, beneath the masks worn in everyday life, darker stories often remain untold, quietly waiting to erupt in the most tragic ways. The flames that consumed the Hartman home also ignited a painful awareness in those who heard the story, a call to acknowledge the hidden struggles many families endure and to recognize the profound impact of emotional neglect and isolation, especially in vulnerable children. The moment the authorities arrived at the scene of the devastating fire, they knew they were facing a case that demanded a meticulous and exhaustive investigation. The charred remains of the Hartman home told a grim story of loss and tragedy, but the questions surrounding the cause and the circumstances lingered heavily in the minds of those tasked with uncovering the truth. Fire investigators combed through the wreckage, carefully analyzing every detail, from burn patterns to residue samples, seeking the origins of the blaze that had claimed the lives of Tom and Linda Hartman. It soon became clear that the fire had not been a mere accident or the result of negligence. Instead, there was evidence that pointed toward deliberate arson. The meticulous work of the fire department's investigation team was exhaustive. Each room, each corner was examined with painstaking precision. Investigators searched for telltale signs of accelerants, unusual burn patterns, and any inconsistencies that might suggest the fire was intentionally set. The house, once a place of quiet suburban comfort, now lay in ruins, a blackened skeleton against the morning sky. Through their careful work, experts identified the fire's origin point, the kitchen area, where the blaze had ignited with unusual rapidity, suggesting the use of an accelerant. Residue testing confirmed traces of flammable liquids, ruling out electrical faults or accidental causes. As the investigation deepened, forensic experts shifted their focus to other critical evidence that might shed light on the events leading to the fire. Among the remains of the dinner plates and utensils, toxicology samples were gathered and sent to laboratories for analysis. The results were both chilling and crucial to understanding the full scope of the crime. Traces of sleeping pills were found in the victim's systems, indicating that Tom and Linda had been incapacitated prior to the fire. This discovery dramatically changed the course of the investigation, transforming it from a case of suspicious fire to one of calculated foul play. The presence of sedatives raised many questions. Who had access to these medications? How and why were they administered? Was the act impulsive or premeditated? Investigators examined medical records and consulted with pharmacies to track the source of the pills. This inquiry led them to a startling suspect, Derek, the 8-year-old boy who had been living with the Hartmans as their adopted son. The community reeled from this revelation. The idea that such a young child could be implicated in such a heinous crime was both disturbing and difficult to comprehend. Law enforcement officials found themselves confronted with a deeply complex situation that blended elements of criminal investigation with psychological evaluation. To unravel the mystery of Derek's motives and mental state, specialists in child psychology and behavioral analysis were brought into the process. Derek underwent a series of comprehensive psychological assessments designed to explore his emotional health, cognitive development, and potential mental disorders. These evaluations revealed a deeply troubled child, grappling with severe internal conflicts. Derek's experiences of racism and alienation within his own family emerged as critical factors in his psychological profile. Despite living in a home that was supposed to be a sanctuary, Derek's sense of belonging was undermined by subtle and overt racial prejudices that permeated the family environment. The feelings of exclusion and rejection intensified his emotional instability, creating a volatile psychological landscape. Experts noted that Derek's emotional world was marked by a complex mix of confusion, fear, anger, and despair. At just 8 years old, his cognitive development limited his ability to fully grasp the consequences of his actions. But this limitation did not diminish the intensity of his inner suffering. His resentment and frustration had built to a breaking point, culminating in an act of violence that shocked the entire community. The child's psychological state was described as fragile and highly unstable, necessitating ongoing mental health support. The case illuminated systemic challenges within the adoption and foster care systems, particularly regarding transracial adoption. It exposed significant gaps in emotional and psychological support for vulnerable children especially those who faced the dual challenges of identity formation and familial tensions complicated by racial dynamics. The professionals involved in Derek's evaluation called for urgent reforms, emphasizing the need for comprehensive care that addresses not only physical safety, but also the intricate emotional and cultural aspects of child welfare. Further investigations into Derek's interactions with social workers and mental health professionals revealed missed opportunities for intervention. Despite several contacts with child welfare agencies, his escalating distress was insufficiently recognized and addressed. This failure highlighted shortcomings in the system's capacity to provide culturally competent and timely mental health services, raising questions about how such lapses might be prevented in the future. The case spurred critical reflections and debates within child welfare circles about improving responsiveness and oversight. The broader societal implications of Derek's case became apparent as discussions unfolded. The tragedy served as a wake-up call to the complexities faced by families involved in transracial adoption. It underscored the importance of equipping parents with enhanced training on cultural sensitivity and racial identity issues, implementing more rigorous psychological assessments and follow-ups for children, and fostering increased awareness of the subtle dynamics that influence familial relationships across racial lines. Legal and ethical questions also arose from Derek's case. The justice system was challenged to balance the demands for accountability with an understanding of the child's developmental limitations and psychological trauma. The intersection of law, child psychology, and ethics added layers of complexity to how Derek's case was handled, with mental health experts advocating for rehabilitative approaches that prioritized long-term therapy and support. Derek's future was seen as dependent on the community's commitment to provide genuine care and opportunities for healing. In the wake of the tragedy, Derek's story became a catalyst for dialogue among child welfare advocates, policymakers, and mental health professionals. It highlighted the urgent need for systemic change to protect vulnerable children from falling through the cracks. The heartbreaking outcome served as a sobering reminder of the collective responsibility borne by adoptive families, social services, and society at large to ensure that children receive not only physical safety, but also emotional and psychological nurturing. This deeply tragic case revealed the fragility of the human mind when confronted with rejection, prejudice, and misunderstanding at a critical stage of development. It demonstrated how unaddressed trauma can lead to destructive behaviors, even in the youngest individuals. The investigation and psychological analyses provided crucial insights into Derek's personal struggles and into broader challenges faced by adoption systems worldwide. As a result, it prompted calls for more compassionate, informed, and holistic approaches to adoption, approaches that honor the complexities of identity, foster emotional healing, and aim to prevent future tragedies rooted in pain and neglect. Ultimately, the case of Derek and the Hartmans stands as a solemn reminder of the profound consequences that can arise when vulnerable children are not fully supported in their emotional and psychological needs. It underscores the essential nature of empathy, cultural understanding, and continuous care within adoptive families and child welfare systems. The lessons learned from this tragedy continue to influence ongoing efforts to improve the lives of adopted children, ensuring that no child is left to navigate the complexities of identity and trauma alone. The case of Derek and the Hartman family ignited a firestorm of emotions and debate that rippled far beyond the quiet streets of their Ohio suburb. The tragedy pierced the collective consciousness of a nation already grappling with complex conversations about race, family, and child welfare. As news of the devastating event spread, communities across the United States were forced to confront an unsettling truth. Profound pain and heartbreak could erupt from within the very nucleus of what is supposed to be the most sacred and protective unit in society, the family. The story of Derek and the Hartmans struck a deep chord, compelling society to ask urgent and uncomfortable questions about the intersections of race, identity, parenting, and the systems meant to safeguard vulnerable children. It became a mirror reflecting the fractures and divisions present in communities nationwide, revealing both shared concerns and deep-seated differences in how people perceive justice, compassion, and responsibility. Across countless living rooms, workplaces, and social media platforms, conversations erupted. some filled with empathy and others with judgment. People from all walks of life wrestled with the complexity of the situation. A child, barely 8 years old, capable of such an act of violence, yet also clearly a victim of circumstances. Many viewed Derek through a lens tinted with sorrow and sympathy. To these individuals, Derek was less a perpetrator and more a child profoundly shaped and ultimately broken by the environment in which he was raised. This perspective highlighted the insidious effects of family racism and emotional neglect, forces that eroded Derek's sense of self-worth and his ability to feel a genuine sense of belonging. Advocates for this view emphasized the profound failures of the Hartman family dynamic and the broader societal prejudices that infiltrated their home, leaving a young boy isolated in a world where he was expected to fit but never truly accepted. To them, Derek's actions, though tragic and condemnable, were the desperate outgrowth of trauma that went unaddressed, calling for compassion and a reevaluation of how the child welfare system responds to pain rather than simply meting out punishment. Yet this empathetic perspective was not without opposition. A significant portion of the public voiced a contrasting and more punitive stance, framing Derek as a dangerous child who had committed a violent crime demanding strict discipline and accountability. From this viewpoint, the focus centered on the severity of the act itself, underscoring the necessity of protecting society from harm and ensuring that children who engage in such behavior face consequences regardless of their age. Skepticism arose regarding the adequacy and timing of support provided to Derek, with many questioning whether earlier and more decisive interventions could have prevented the tragedy. Advocates of this position stressed the importance of early detection of behavioral issues and called for robust mechanisms to monitor and manage children exhibiting severe emotional distress or aggression. The tension between empathy for a child's vulnerability and the pursuit of justice for a heinous act fueled a complex and often heated debate. It revealed society's struggle to reconcile the innocence and presumed purity of childhood with the harsh reality that children, too, can be capable of destructive actions. Throughout this tumultuous discourse, media outlets played a crucial role in shaping and amplifying public perception. News stories ranged widely in tone and focus. Some portrayed Derek sympathetically, emphasizing the emotional pain and neglect that likely led to his actions. Others took a more sensationalist approach, spotlighting the shocking nature of the crime and the terrifying notion of a child as an arsonist and murderer. Television programs, newspapers, and online publications wrestled with how best to present the story, balancing the need for factual reporting with the desire to captivate audiences. Social media exploded with commentary, debates, and campaigns as users across platforms expressed outrage, sorrow, support, and calls for reform. Hashtags dedicated to foster care reform and racial justice trended, linking Derek's case to broader systemic issues faced by foster children and adoptive families nationwide. The case transcended its local origins to become a symbol highlighting the deficiencies in psychological support, cultural competency, and monitoring of families within the child welfare system. Activists and advocacy groups seized the moment, pressing policymakers and child welfare agencies for change. They emphasized the urgent necessity of comprehensive mental health services tailored specifically to the unique experiences of children in foster care and adoptive placements. These advocates called for culturally sensitive approaches that recognize the complex identities of transracial adoptees, pushing for enhanced training for caregivers and professionals alike. The goal was to create environments where children like Derek could receive the emotional and psychological support essential for healthy development and well-being. In the wake of the public outcry and mounting professional evaluations, Derek was placed under the close care and supervision of specialists dedicated to addressing his intricate psychological needs. His treatment plan encompassed intensive therapy sessions aimed at helping him process the layers of trauma embedded in his young mind, to comprehend and articulate his emotions, and to cultivate healthier coping mechanisms. These efforts sought not only to rehabilitate Derek, but also to prevent any further harm, setting the foundation for a future where he might find stability, understanding, and hope. The involvement of child psychologists, social workers, and mental health counselors underscored a broad recognition that Derek's case demanded a dual focus, one that balanced accountability with healing. Beyond the individual, the tragedy of Derek and the Hartman family became a powerful catalyst for reflection and reform within social services and child welfare agencies. It exposed significant shortcomings in how systems operate, particularly in monitoring the emotional well-being of children within adoptive and foster families. The case revealed that while physical safety is paramount, emotional and psychological welfare can be overlooked or inadequately addressed. In response, many agencies undertook rigorous reviews of their policies and procedures, seeking to improve assessment protocols, increase cultural sensitivity training, and ensure more consistent and sustained follow-up with vulnerable children and their caregivers. Derek's case rapidly became a cornerstone in national conversations about balancing child protection with mental health support, advocating for more integrated and nuanced approaches that recognize the realities faced by transracial adoptees and their families. On a profoundly human level, Derek's story resonated deeply, cutting through policy debates and legal arguments to highlight the indispensable importance of genuine love, acceptance, and emotional security within families. It underscored the truth that family is not merely a legal or social designation, but a sanctuary where every member, especially the most vulnerable, must feel seen, valued, and protected. The case illuminated how even subtle prejudices and neglect, when left unchecked, can corrode these bonds and set the stage for catastrophic outcomes. The necessity of vigilance in nurturing the emotional health of children, particularly those who have endured trauma and displacement, emerged as a vital lesson for caregivers and society alike. As Derek continues on his journey under the vigilant care of professionals, the shadow of the tragedy remains a solemn reminder of the consequences that can arise when emotional wounds are ignored, misunderstood, or inadequately treated. His story is a call to action, urging communities, families, and social systems to commit themselves to deeper empathy, enhanced resources, and unwavering support for children navigating difficult and often painful paths. It challenges society to confront uncomfortable truths about race, family dynamics, and the complexities of childhood trauma, insisting upon a collective responsibility to protect and nurture the most fragile members of the community. Ultimately, the case of Derek and the Hartmans stands as a testament to both the fragility and resilience of the human spirit. It reveals the profound consequences that arise when love falters and prejudice persists, but also shines as a beacon of hope that through awareness, reform, and compassion, future tragedies can be averted. The lessons gleaned from this heartbreaking episode continue to shape conversations, policies, and practices aimed at creating environments where all children, regardless of their origins or circumstances, can grow up feeling truly loved, supported, and safe.